Deborah Hendrix, and I'm one of the creators of the movie you just watched called I Just Wanted to Live.
This documentary started out as being an experiment to utilize and showcase our four oral histories from our World War II collection. But for Deborah and me, it soon took on a more personal dimension when we realized that we were honoring four specific men and giving voice, their voices, to the ordeal that they experienced in their youth, and doing this in a public venue, which was long overdue.
So it was actually Diane who had the idea for the movie. She had done the editing on these transcripts, and four of these stood out.
What inspired me to do this documentary was being able to utilize in a public forum the very moving and gripping passages from the oral histories of these four POWs from our World War II collection, and then setting their voices against the backdrop of powerful war images.
And Diane's job was to write a script, I guess, that would organize these testimonies into something that we could follow. So our goal was to try and tell this story and do it justice, because we felt that this story was one that is not generally known.
The Battle of Bataan and the Bataan Death March struck wrenching chords in American history. But then these events became isolated in the greater story, the greater drama of World War II. So what happened to these men after the battle, after the Death March? Where did they go? Well, they all gave me the answers to these questions. They all experienced 3.5 years on the sidelines of war. And that's an eternity after the Death March had faded from the front page news headlines.
And I think I'm also not alone in not recognizing the extent of the brutality and hardships that these fellows went through, these survivors of this treatment, as they were held captive by the Japanese.
As POWs, these men were forgotten, and that was another reason to do the documentary. We had the tools and we had their own words to give life to the ordeal that these men experienced in their youth, 60-odd years later.
So recognizing that, Diane came to me early in this year, 2008, and she asked, do you think we could make a movie about this? And I was already intrigued with all of this, so I said, sure, let's do it.
The challenges in writing this documentary were many for me. I had to find the passages in each of their narratives that best reflected the physical torment and the mental torment that they experienced for so many years. I was really curious about how these men became psychologically numb to witnessing death and torture and starvation on a daily basis. And I wondered, how do you get through the day after you've seen your best friend tortured or slowly starving to death? How do you get through the day when you've seen someone beheaded?
Well, we certainly had the audio recorded interviews of these fellas. And that was one challenge, just going through and picking out sound bites that represented their experiences and that could tell the story. And Diane wrote the script so that we could have a structured framework to tell the story.
But in between these dominant themes, I had to weave the more subtle themes of dehumanization, lack of morale, hopelessness.
So that was our first challenge, just simply making a script and putting sound bites in and dividing their experiences up and grouping them so that we could kind of get the story from different angles.
I had to find the passages in each of the POW's narratives that best reflected their physical torment and their mental torment for so many years.
And the biggest hurdle for me is the editor. We had absolutely no images. We had a 55-minute movie, as it turned out, with no images. And that was challenge number one.
Well, we had to cover the obvious hard topics in this documentary, the Battle of Bataan, the Death March, the internment camps in the Philippines, the hell ships, and the labor camps in Japan.
We really hadn't started out to make a movie that long. But like most people who create things, we didn't want to leave out a single detail. So very early on, we decided to make 2 movies, the long expanded version and a shorter one that we would use for presentation.
I came away with a new meaning for the word hero. Victor Cody, in the documentary, was adamant about not wanting to be considered a hero. But to me, just getting through one more day on the Death March, one more day in the internment camps of O'Donnell or Cabanatuan, getting through one more day on a hell ship, or in the coal mines in Japan, or the shipyards, or the factories. To me, that was heroic, when all the odds were against survival.
So early on, we made 2 very important connections, I guess you would say. And the first one was through research that I did on the internet trying to find images. I came across a website operated by Roger Mansell, Palo Alto, California. It's called the Center for Research, Allied POWs held under the Japanese. And he sent us 8 DVDs full of images and all kinds of documents that related to our topic. And that was probably the tipping point that we could actually make the movie at all. And the second one was by a fella named Ben Steele, who was also one of these POWs and went through the same 3.5 years that our interviewees did. His story was a little different because he was an artist and he actually drew the images that he saw around him every day.
We set high standards for doing this documentary. We had to find the appropriate war images as a backdrop. We had to get this right. We set out to recapture those years in their own words, not only for the men, but also for their families.
So between those 2, I thought we could probably do it. And so we did. And that's why in the movie you will see a lot of artwork by Ben Steele.
Over the 6-month period that it took to put this documentary together, we listened to these men's voices, we read and reread the transcriptions, and we grew very fond of Herbert Pepper and Conrad Alberti and Victor Cody and John Bumgarner. And we hope we did justice to these men's ordeals in the Pacific.
So there were a few scenes that I had to actually recreate. The fish experiment, for instance. This is where I did research on how the Japanese would dry fish out outside. And I did that. And creating rusty iron water. And a few other things that maybe I should keep to myself.
And in the process, we utilized our oral history collection in a way that no one had ever anticipated. The hell that these men experienced in their youth will not be forgotten. It is in this documentary.
If I were put in that circumstance, would I have survived? And I honestly don't know if I could survive. And that brings us to the title of the movie. I just wanted to live. And I think it really comes down to that. All of these layers are peeled back. And it comes down to that one simple question. How bad do you want to live? I think that was the answer. They wanted to live. And they did.